Hello everyone. Today we are going to talk about the Romantic period. This was the time between 1785 to 1830. This was when Samuel Johnson, the person who conceived dictionary, died, and Blake and Burns published their first poems. This was also the time when major writers of the preceding era were dead or either unproductive. And England was turning from an agricultural society to a modern industrial nation. Disraeli called it the two nations to indicate the divide between rich and poor. Now, the theory of market capitalism meant that there were poor wages, longer working hours, sordid working conditions, and large-scale employment of women and children in tasks that defeated both their body and the spirit. Now the poor suffered and the merchants prospered. Women were deprived because they had no education. They were made to join lowly work. They had rigid sexual behavior. They had no legal rights, especially after marriage. They were thought to be inferior to men, and they had only domestic talents. But despite that, women writers progressed. Mary Wollstonecraft wrote about women's movement. England acquired universal adult suffrage in 1928. So this was the time when Shelley said literature of the age has arisen as it were from a new birth. This was a revolutionary time. 18th century theorists thought of poetry as an imitation of human life, a mirror led up to nature. Wordsworth described poetry as the spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings. Blake and Shelley described poetry as an embodiment of poets' imaginative vision. And Coleridge described poetry as the plant, seed-like idea in poet's imagination, and then that grows by poet's feelings and sense experience, and then it evolves into a whole where the parts are linked to each other and to the whole. Now, lyric poem written in the first-person form, the use of I was very prominent at this time. And Keats said, if poetry comes not as natural as the leaves to a tree, it had better not come at all. Shelley said that it was an error to assert that the finest passages of poetry are produced by labor and study. He suggested that they are the products of unconscious creativity. A great statue or picture grows under the power of the artist as a child in a mother's womb, he further said. Now, Coleridge said that poetry involves spontaneous impulse and voluntary purpose. So therefore, romantic poetry became synonymous with nature poetry. Romantic poems were scattered with references to human life, passion, and expressiveness. Romanticism was the literary equivalent of the French Revolution. All things are by nature equally fit subjects for poetry. This was said by Hazlitt. According to Hazlitt, Wordsworth was the most original poet. Wordsworth's poems contained words such as common, ordinary, everyday, and humble. Coleridge dealt with everyday things of this world. Keats referred to supernatural events in his poems, while Blake dealt with the occult and the esoteric, and Coleridge dealt with the mesmerism and hypnotism. De Quincey depicted dreams and nightmares. This was a time when the poets and writers were attacking pride. The Romantic period was characterized by free enterprise, industrial revolution, revolutionary ideas, radical individualism, human potential and power. Coleridge is believed to have said, mind is not passive, but made in God's image, and that too in the sublimest sense, the image of the Creator. So the Romantics believed in reason and imagination. 18th century writers regarded themselves as integral parts of the society, but some Romantic authors isolated themselves. For example, Wordsworth described himself as musing in solitude. Words such as single, solitary, alone, by oneself were repeatedly used. Coleridge, Byron, and Shelley represented a lonely protagonist who rejected the society or was rejected by it. There was a theme of exile running in Romantic poems, and romantic nonconformist was always a sinner. Coleridge and Wordsworth interpreted the Industrial Revolution as the violent preliminary to the new earth and heaven of apocalyptic prophecy. Literature became big business due to enlightened-inspired education, population growth, increased readership, reading for pleasure, more leisure time, more disposable income, technology improvements in printing, and more modern libraries established. Writers were treated as serious practitioners. Now, familiar essays, a commentary on a non-technical subject written in a relaxed and intimate manner, flourished too. These essays dealt with downtrodden ones and villains. This was a time which was favorable to essays but not to writing for the stage. Licensing Act was repealed in 1843. Drury Lane and Covent Garden were the two monopoly theatres in spoken drama. They were vast, ill-lighted, and noisy, and unruly audiences gathered, and actors played in a grand style. Still, writers tried a hand at poetic plays. Byron wrote satire but did not succeed. Shelley became famous dramatist. The Cenci was staged after his death. Gothic novels emerged, and since women were disadvantaged, they were better at this genre. Novel of purpose emerged too. Mary Shelley, wife of Percy Shelley and daughter of Mary Wollstonecraft, wrote Frankenstein. Other writers were Jane Austen, who was admired by only a few readers but had greater staying power, and Sir Walter Scott, who had international birth. So this was all about Romanticism. I leave you with two questions. How is Romanticism relevant in today's world? And do you think that evil needs to exist for good to prevail? Thank you.